Today I'm out on the streets of Frankfurt to test this new gimbal. It's the FeiyuTech AK4500. And I thought this is also a good opportunity to talk about gimbals in general, when to use them, when not to use them, and how to get the best out of them. One of the questions I get asked the most when it comes to operating a gimbal is actually regarding the camera settings. Should you turn IBIS on or off? And the answer is not very easy because, well, IBIS usually improves your image, right? It makes it less shaky, it's just image stabilization, and this is pretty much the same. You use it to get some smooth and nice tracking shots. So why would you turn IBIS off? The general advice when it comes to IBIS is try to turn it off if you're at the very wide end, for example, everything below 24mm, because you may end up with some weird wobbly effect, kind of like you're applying a stabilizer and it doesn't really go right. And you can see in those sample shots, it doesn't really look good when using an ultra wide angle lens. I would say usually everything above 35mm, I definitely turn IBIS on because it reduces some micro jitter, some vibration, some unwanted motion, and makes the result much more pleasing. One of the best and actually most obvious way to improve and maybe differentiate your gimbal work is actually to use different focal length. It's something we often do as filmmakers, right? But on a gimbal somehow most people end up shooting very wide, which makes sense if you want to follow someone around, and especially if you go even further, if you go 85 or 100mm like I have right here, you can still get some great results. So don't be afraid, stop only shooting very wide and go closer. When it comes to choosing the right gimbal, it's very important to keep the size in mind as well as the payload and weight. So for example, as you can see, the AK4500 is a rather big gimbal. So why did I choose this? First off, because of the handling system and because I often use a bigger mirrorless camera like this right here. This is the Fuji X-H1 and this is a prime lens 85mm, and as you can see, the setup is actually pretty big, especially considering this is a mirrorless setup. But this is good for commercial shoots. For commercial shoots I also have time to set up my gimbal, to balance it, to make sure everything works out. I drive there with the car, which means I can bring the case with the gimbal inside. If I'm traveling, if I'm going abroad, I would rather bring a smaller camera setup and a smaller gimbal because I want to be able to film some stuff quickly. I don't always want to get noticed, especially when it comes to tourism shoots. You don't want people staring into your lens, right? Or if you're just running around, it's just much easier. You don't get disturbed too much. So you always need to look what's best for you, because I'm saying this is a good gimbal. That doesn't mean it's the right one for you, because you really need to look, do you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cameras? And then you need to look, is one gimbal even gonna work out? If you have one huge camera and the rest are tiny cameras, then one gimbal is not enough because the payload and size will not match. So that is something to keep in mind. While gimbals are great and there are lots of good reasons to use them, you shouldn't overuse them. Just look if there's really a reason for that. You also don't use a jib or a slider in every scene in every movie, right? So there should always be a reason. Just ask yourself and always use it in moderation. A good way to improve your gimbal work is also to simply look where is a beginning and end in your shot. Just like you would do maybe with a tripod. You also don't pan very fast and all of a sudden stop, except maybe you're shooting an action film, but most of the time you would slow down, obviously. So it always makes sense to give the footage a clear start and ending. Another tip I can give if you have the budget is obviously to use the same cameras on a shoot. For example, what I do on commercial shoots is I take one of our main cameras on a gimbal and the other one on a tripod, because otherwise I'm forced to often switching with a quick release plate and balancing new, which is quite annoying. It takes a lot of time. Use one on a gimbal, one on a tripod or handheld, whatever your setup is, because that can save you a lot of time. back to the gimbal now, the AK4500. What I really like is the dual handling system. It really took me a while because actually just when I reviewed the Xeon Crane 3 I realized maybe having some, even though funny looking grip, can be quite useful, and it's the same here. You can remove this second handle and you can also use it as a single handle, but to be honest I definitely prefer it, and that was the main reason I wanted to test it, is because this just makes it much better. As you can see, it's much more natural. I can even hold it like this, I can get some low angle shots, and as you can see all axes are locked right now, which is one of the biggest advantages. So yeah, overall I'm pretty happy, especially after the disappointment of the AK4000, which had a lot of jitter issues. My general advice, especially for people who are not used to gimbals yet, maybe you just got your new gimbal and you're gonna use it a lot, which is fine for testing I guess, but try to really think, does it enhance, improve your video, or is it rather distracting? So my general advice is, when it comes to gimbals, less is more.